The wagon wheel shattered in her hands like her life had 6 months before, splinters driving into Grace Calloway's palms as the rim split clean through. And she stood there in the dusty yard of her workshop on the edge of Guthrie, Oklahoma territory, staring at the broken pieces with a familiar numbness that had become her constant companion since the accident. Blood welled up in thin lines across her skin, but she barely felt it. The pain in her hands was nothing compared to the ache that lived in her left leg, the one that dragged slightly when she walked now, the one that had been crushed beneath a falling stack of timber 8 months ago when she had been helping her father in this very workshop. Her father, who would never help anyone again, who had died 3 months after that accident from a fever that the doctor said came from exhaustion, and a broken heart over watching his daughter struggle. Grace wiped her hands on her leather apron and limped toward the water barrel, dunking her palms into the cool liquid. The workshop around her was silent except for the creaking of wood in the afternoon heat. It was June of 1891, and the Oklahoma Territory was still young and wild, full of people chasing dreams and running from pasts. Grace was doing neither. She was simply trying to survive. She had been the best wheelwright apprentice her father ever trained, better even than the 2 boys from town who had quit after a month. But now her hands shook sometimes, and her leg gave out without warning, and the work that had once flowed from her like breathing now felt like pushing a boulder uphill. She was 22 years old and felt ancient. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn, water dripping from her fingers. A rider was approaching from the main road, leading a limping horse behind his own mount. As they drew closer, Grace could see the problem. The horse's left rear wheel on the small cart it was pulling had come completely off, the axle dragging in the dirt. The rider dismounted with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in a saddle than on solid ground. He was tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar beneath a worn brown hat. His clothes were dusty from travel, and he had the lean, weathered look of a cowboy who had driven cattle across long miles. As he approached, removing his hat, Grace could see he was probably in his mid-20s, with gray eyes that held a kind of quiet wariness she recognized because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. "Madam," he said, his voice rough but polite, "I heard there was a wheelwright in Guthrie. Hoping that would be you, or maybe you could point me in the right direction." Grace straightened, trying not to let her weight shift too obviously to her good leg. "I am the wheelwright, Grace Calloway." His eyes flickered briefly to her stance, then back to her face without judgment. "Isaac Irving, madam. My cart wheel gave out about 2 miles back. I have been walking these horses in the heat, and I need to get to Texas by the end of next week. Can you help?" She limped past him toward the cart, feeling his presence behind her like a weight. The wheel lay in the back of the cart, and she pulled it out, examining it with practiced eyes despite the tremor in her fingers. The hub was cracked, 2 spokes were completely broken, and the rim had warped from what looked like impact with a large rock. "This is going to need a complete rebuild," she said, her voice flat. 2 days of work, maybe 3. How much? She named her price, watching his face. It was fair, even cheap for the amount of work involved. Isaac studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That works. But madam, I noticed you seem to be working alone here. No offense meant, but can you handle this?" The question should have angered her, but he had asked it gently, and she was too tired for anger anyway. "I can handle it. I did not mean to insult you. I just want to make sure the job can be done in time." Grace set the wheel down, meeting his eyes directly. "Mr. Irving, I have been building and repairing wheels since I was 10 years old. I am broken myself, as you can clearly see, but I still know my trade. If you do not trust me, the next wheelwright is in Oklahoma City. about 40 miles northeast. Something shifted in Isaac's expression, a softness entering those gray eyes. I did not say I did not trust you, and I do not have time to get to Oklahoma City. Besides, broken things often work better than people think they will. They have had to learn how. She blinked, surprised by the comment. Most people either pretended not to notice her limp or stared at it uncomfortably. Isaac had acknowledged it without making it the only thing about her. I will need the full payment up front, she said, retreating to business. Half now, half when it is done. That is standard, is it not? She nodded reluctantly. He reached into his pocket and counted out coins, pressing them into her still damp palm. His fingers were calloused and warm, and the brief contact sent an unexpected flutter through her chest that she immediately suppressed. I will need to find somewhere to stay while you work, Isaac said, glancing back toward town. There is a boarding house on Main Street. Mrs. Patterson runs it. Clean beds, decent food. Much obliged. He started to turn, then paused. Miss Calloway, you are bleeding. She looked down at her hands, having forgotten the splinters. Blood had mixed with the water, leaving pale red trails down her wrists. It is nothing. May I? He gestured toward her hands, and before she could refuse, he had pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket. He took her right hand gently, examining the splinters embedded in her palm. You have got 3 good ones in here. Do you have tweezers? I can take care of it myself. I am sure you can, but I am here now and I have steady hands. He looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes that was not pity, not exactly kindness either, but rather a simple practical willingness to help. Please. Grace found herself nodding, then leading him into the workshop where better light filtered through the high windows. She sat on a stool while Isaac washed his hands in the basin, then returned with her tweezers from the tool bench. He pulled another stool close and sat, taking her hand in his again. His touch was surprisingly gentle for a cowboy. He worked carefully, extracting each splinter with patient precision. Grace watched his face as he concentrated, noting the fine lines around his eyes, the slight scar on his chin, the way his jaw tightened when he pulled out a particularly deep splinter. You are good at this, she said. Had plenty of practice pulling cactus spines out of horses and cows and occasionally myself. He glanced up with a slight smile. And people when I was riding with a crew down in Texas. Cowboys are always getting torn up by something. You are not with a crew now. His smile faded. No, madam. I am on my own these days. There was a story there, Grace could tell, but she did not push. She understood about stories that hurt to tell. He finished with her right hand and moved to her left, his fingers warm against her skin. There, he said finally, dabbing at the cleaned wounds with his handkerchief. Keep them clean and they should heal up fine. Thank you. No trouble at all. He stood, and she noticed for the first time that he moved with a slight stiffness in his left side. He saw her notice and smiled wryly. Got kicked by a bull in Fort Worth 2 years ago. Cracked 3 ribs and they never quite healed right. Hurts like hell when the weather changes. Is that why you left your crew? Part of it. He settled his hat back on his head. I will let you get to work then, Miss Calloway. I will check back tomorrow to see how you are progressing. After he left, Grace stood in the workshop holding his handkerchief, which she had forgotten to return. It smelled faintly of leather and sage and something else, something warm that she could not quite name. She folded it carefully and set it aside, then turned to the broken wheel. The work was hard, harder than it should have been. Her hands ached where the splinters had been, and her leg throbbed from standing. But she fell into the rhythm of it, letting the familiar motions carry her. She heated the rim in her small forge, hammering it back into shape on the anvil. The sound of metal on metal rang through the workshop, a sound her father had loved. Tears blurred her vision unexpectedly, and she had to stop, setting down the hammer. She missed him so much it felt like something physical, a stone in her chest. He would have known what to say about Isaac Irving, about the way the cowboy's gentle touch had made her feel something other than numb for the first time in months. By the time the sun set, she had the rim reshaped and 3 new spokes cut and fitted. Her entire body ached, and she could barely put weight on her leg. She locked up the workshop and limped to the small house behind it, where she lived alone now, heated a can of beans for supper, and fell into bed without bothering to change out of her clothes. She dreamed of her father teaching her to true a wheel, his patient voice explaining how everything had to be balanced, how weakness in one spot would spread to the whole structure. She woke with tears on her face and the gray light of dawn seeping through her window. The second day of work was worse than the first. Grace's hands were swollen and stiff, making it difficult to grip the tools. Her leg gave out twice, sending her crashing to the workshop floor. The second time, she lay there in the sawdust and seriously considered just staying down, just giving up entirely. But then she thought of Isaac Irving coming back to find his wheel unfinished, thought of disappointing another person, of confirming that she really was too broken to do this work anymore, and she dragged herself back up. She was fitting the final spokes when she heard footsteps in the doorway. "Miss Calloway," she turned to find Isaac watching her, his expression concerned. "Mr. Irving, I am making good progress. Should be done by tomorrow afternoon as promised." He stepped into the workshop, his eyes moving from her face to the wheel and back again. "You look exhausted." "I am fine." "You are not fine." He said it matter-of-factly, not accusingly. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Grace opened her mouth to lie, then found she did not have the energy. "I cannot remember." Isaac nodded slowly. "Right, put down your tools. I need to finish." "And you will. But first, you are going to eat. Come on." When she did not move, he added, "Please, as a favor to me, I cannot in good conscience let you work yourself to death on my wheel." There was something about the way he said it, so gentle but firm, that made her resistance crumble. She set down her mallet and wiped her hands on her apron, then let him lead her out of the workshop. She was limping badly by then, could not hide it, and to her surprise, Isaac simply offered his arm without comment. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, letting him bear some of her weight as they walked toward town. The restaurant was small but clean, run by a German couple who made excellent stew. Isaac guided her to a table by the window and ordered for both of them, asking for extra bread. When the food came, Grace realized she was starving. She ate steadily while Isaac watched, eating his own meal more slowly. "How long have you been running the workshop alone?" he asked. 3 months, since my father died." "I am sorry. So am I." She buttered another piece of bread, surprised by how good it tasted. "He was the best wheelwright in the territory. I am just trying to live up to his name. From what I have seen, you are doing fine work. But I am slow, and I hurt all the time. And sometimes I think I should just sell the workshop and try to find work as a seamstress or a cook or something else that does not require standing all day." "Is that what you want to do?" Grace looked up at him. "No, I love building wheels. I love taking broken things and making them whole again. I love the smell of the forge and the sound of the hammer. I just do not know if I can keep doing it." Isaac was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "After I got kicked by that bull, I could not ride for 4 months. Thought my cowboy days were over. The pain was bad, but worse was feeling useless, feeling like I had lost the only thing I was good at. What changed? I realized I had a choice. I could let the injury define me, or I could work with it. Could not do everything I used to do, so I stopped trying. Found different ways. got better at planning, at working smarter instead of harder, stopped taking the dangerous jobs that required bull riding, focused on what I could do well. But you are a cowboy. That is physical work no matter how you approach it. And you are a wheelwright. Also physical work. He leaned forward slightly. Miss Calloway, I watched you working this morning before you saw me. You know your craft. Your hands know what to do even when they shake. But you are trying to work the way your father did, the way you used to. Maybe you need to find your own way now. She stared at him, something tight loosening in her chest. I do not know how. Then maybe I can help, if you would let me. You need to get to Texas. I need to get there by the end of next week. That gives us days yet. And Miss Calloway, I am going to be honest with you. I have been lonely as hell since I left my crew. Spending time in your workshop, helping fix my wheel and maybe helping you figure out a better way to work. That sounds a hell of a lot better than sitting in a boarding house room counting the hours. Grace felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something she had thought died with her father. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. Why are you being so kind to me? Isaac smiled, and it transformed his whole face, softening the hard lines. Because you remind me of myself, and because when I pulled those splinters out of your hands yesterday, you did not flinch once. That is the kind of strength I respect, the quiet kind that keeps going even when it hurts. I flinch on the inside. We all do, but you are still here, still working, still trying. That counts for something. They finished their meal in companionable silence, then walked back to the workshop together. Isaac did not leave. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and asked her to teach him about wheels. Grace was skeptical at first, but he proved to be a quick learner with good hands. More importantly, he anticipated when she needed help, stepping in to do the heavy lifting or the work that required prolonged standing, but always asking first, never assuming. Together, they finished fitting the spokes and began the delicate work of truing the wheel, making sure it was perfectly balanced. Isaac held the wheel while Grace made minute adjustments, tapping the spokes with careful precision. It was intimate work, requiring them to stand close together, their heads nearly touching as they examined each angle. Little more to the left, Grace murmured, and Isaac shifted. There, perfect. You have an amazing eye for this. It is all about patience and precision. You cannot rush it. I am starting to understand that. By the time the sun began to set, the wheel was nearly complete. It just needed the iron rim to be fitted and shrunk on, which would happen tomorrow. Grace's whole body ached, but it was a good ache, the ache of accomplishment rather than futile struggle. Thank you, she said as Isaac prepared to leave, for your help today. It was my pleasure. He hesitated at the doorway. Miss Calloway, would you join me for supper again tomorrow? After we finish the wheel, she should say no. He was a customer, a stranger, someone who would be gone to Texas in days. But the thought of going back to her empty house, eating cold beans alone, was suddenly unbearable. Yes, I would like that. His smile was like sunrise. Good, I will see you tomorrow then. That night, Grace slept better than she had in months. She dreamed not of loss but of possibility, of gray eyes and gentle hands and the sound of laughter she had not heard in her own voice for so long. The next morning, she woke early and actually took time with her appearance, braiding her blonde hair neatly and putting on a clean shirt. She told herself it was just about being professional, but she knew it was more than that. Isaac arrived just after dawn, carrying 2 wrapped parcels. Breakfast, he explained. Figured we should start early if we want to finish before supper. They ate fresh bread and cheese while sitting on the workshop steps, watching the town come alive around them. Guthrie was growing fast, new buildings going up every month as more settlers arrived to stake their claims in the territory. It had only been 2 years since the land run of 1889 that had opened this area for settlement, and everything still had a raw, unfinished quality. "You like it here?" Isaac asked. "It is the only place I have ever known. My father came in the land run, staked his claim, and built the workshop within the first month. He said there would always be need for a wheelwright in a growing town. He was right about that. What about you? Where are you from originally?" "Missouri. Little town called Springfield. Left when I was 17 to work cattle drives. Never really settled anywhere since." "You want to settle, I mean." Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I used to think I did not. Thought I liked the freedom of moving around, never being tied down. But lately, I have been wondering if I was just running from something." "What would you be running from?" "The fear of caring about something and losing it, I suppose." He looked at her directly. "After my ribs got broken, I left the crew I had been with for 3 years. Good men, like brothers to me, but I could not stand them seeing me weak, seeing me struggle, so I left before they could leave me." Grace understood that more than she wanted to admit. "After my accident, some of my father's friends offered to help run the workshop. I turned them all down. Told them I could manage on my own." "Could you?" "No, but I was too proud to admit it." She stood, brushing crumbs from her skirt. "Come on, let us finish this wheel." The final stage of wheelwrighting was fitting the iron rim. Grace heated it in the forge until it glowed orange. Then she and Isaac, working together, lifted it and fitted it over the wooden wheel. As the metal cooled, it contracted, binding everything together with tremendous force. It required precise timing and coordination, and Grace felt a flutter of nervousness as they began. But Isaac followed her instructions perfectly, his strength compensating for what her injured leg could not provide. When the rim was in place, they plunged the whole wheel into the water trough, and steam hissed up around them. They stood there together in the cloud of vapor, both breathing hard from the effort, and when it cleared and they examined the wheel, it was perfect. "We did it," Grace said, surprised by the emotion in her voice. "You did it, I just helped." "No, we did it together. I could not have managed alone, not this fast and not this well." Isaac reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair back from her face, his touch leaving a warm trail on her skin. "Then I am glad I was here." They stood very close together, the steam still rising around them, and Grace felt her heart beating fast in her chest. Isaac's eyes had darkened, and she could see her own longing reflected in them. He started to lean toward her, and she tilted her face up, barely breathing. Then a voice called from the workshop entrance, and they sprang apart like guilty children. A farmer stood there with a broken wagon tongue, asking if Grace could repair it. She forced her mind back to business, examining the break and quoting a price. By the time the farmer left with promises to return the next day, the moment between her and Isaac had passed, but it had not disappeared. It hung in the air between them as they finished securing his wheel to the cart, as she accepted his final payment with trembling fingers, as he loaded his gear and prepared to leave. "About that supper," Isaac said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I was thinking, maybe we could make it something more than just a meal." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Miss Calloway, I mean Grace, if I may call you that. I have not felt this comfortable with another person in longer than I can remember, and I am wondering if maybe you feel the same way." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "I do. The thing is, I still need to get to Texas. I have a job waiting there on a ranch outside of Austin, but after today, after working with you, I find myself not wanting to leave." "Then do not." The words were out before she could stop them, bold and terrifying. Isaac stared at her, hope and uncertainty warring on his face. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying that I need help in the workshop. Real help, not just for one wheel but ongoing. And I am saying that I have not felt this much like myself since before the accident. And I am saying that if you leave for Texas right now, I will regret not asking you to stay for the rest of my life." Isaac took 3 quick steps toward her and took her hands in his, careful of her healing palms. "Grace Calloway, I need you to understand something. I have not been easy to care about. I have a temper sometimes and I get restless and I am used to moving around. I cannot promise I would be perfect at staying in one place. I do not need perfect, I just need honest. Then honestly, I think I have been looking for you my whole life without knowing it. Someone who understands being broken. Someone strong enough to keep going anyway. Someone who needs me the way I need them." "I do need you," she whispered. "I just met you 2 days ago, and I already do not want to imagine going back to being alone." "Then you do not have to." He lifted one of her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I will send word to Texas that I am not coming. And if you will have me, I will stay here in Guthrie and help you run this workshop." Just like that. You would give up your job. That job was just another way of running. This, what we could build together that would be worth staying for. Grace felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were not tears of grief this time. "I am broken, Isaac. Truly broken. My leg will never fully heal and I have nightmares about the accident, and some days I can barely get out of bed. And I will be there on those days. I will help you out of bed, and I will hold you through the nightmares, and I will be the strength you need when yours runs out. Because, Grace, you said you need me, but I need you just as much. I need your courage and your skill and your stubborn refusal to give up. I need someone to build a life with instead of just drifting through. My father used to say that a good wheel needs every spoke, that each one supports the others. Sounds like a wise man, he was, and he would have liked you." Isaac pulled her gently into his arms, and Grace let herself lean against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. His arms came around her, strong and sure, and for the first time since the accident, she felt safe. They stood like that for a long moment before Isaac pulled back just enough to look down at her. "I know this is fast. We can take our time, get to know each other properly. I can find a room in town, court you the right way. Or," Grace said, surprising herself, "you could stay in the small room above the workshop. My father used to sleep there sometimes when he was working late. It has a bed and a stove. Nothing fancy, but it would save you boarding house fees. Are you sure? People might talk. Let them talk. I am tired of caring what people think." Isaac smiled, that transforming smile that made her heart skip. "Then I accept. And Grace, I promise you I will be a gentleman. I will not rush you into anything. I know you will not. That is why I trust you." They had supper that night at the restaurant again, but this time it felt different, charged with possibility. Isaac told her stories about his years on cattle drives, the places he had seen, the people he had met. Grace talked about learning her trade, about her father's patience and wisdom, about her dreams of expanding the workshop someday to include a blacksmith forge. "We could do that," Isaac said. "I know some blacksmithing. Not expert level, but enough to be useful. Between the two of us, we could make this the best wheel and metalwork shop in the territory. You really mean it, do not you, about staying?" "I really mean it." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Grace, I have been half alive for so long, just going through the motions. These past 2 days, working with you, I have felt more real than I have in years. That is not something I am willing to walk away from." That night, after Isaac settled into the room above the workshop, Grace lay in her bed and thought about the strange, wonderful turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been alone and struggling, barely holding on. Now she had a partner, someone who saw her brokenness and did not flinch, someone who offered his own strength without trying to diminish hers. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Isaac proved to be not just helpful but invaluable. He built a high stool that let Grace work while sitting, taking the weight off her leg. He reorganized the workshop to make tools more accessible, reducing how much she had to move around. He took on the heaviest tasks without being asked, but always checked with her before making decisions, respecting that it was her workshop, her trade. But more than the practical help, he mended something deeper in her. On the days when her leg hurt so badly she could barely walk, he brought her meals and sat with her, reading aloud from newspapers or just talking. When she woke gasping from nightmares of the accident, she could see the light in his window above the workshop and knew she was not alone. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, about a father who drank too much and a mother who died young. He told her about the freedom he had found on the cattle trails, but also about the loneliness, the way he had kept everyone at arm's length, because it felt safer than risking attachment. Grace told him about the accident in detail for the first time, about how the timber had fallen so fast she had not even had time to scream, about waking up in agony with her father's terrified face above her, about the long months of healing when she was not sure she would ever walk again. She told him about her father's death, about finding him one morning simply gone, his heart having given out in his sleep, and how that loss had nearly broken her completely. "But you survived," Isaac said, holding her as she cried against his chest. "You survived, and you kept the workshop going, and you are still here. That takes more strength than most people have. I do not feel strong. The strongest people never do. They are too busy doing what needs to be done to think about whether they are strong enough." Their first kiss happened on an August evening, nearly 2 months after they met. They were working late, finishing a rush order for a freight company. The workshop was hot from the forge, and they were both sweating and tired. Grace was trying to lift a heavy rim, and it slipped in her grip. Isaac caught it before it could fall on her foot, and suddenly they were pressed close together, his arms around her, her hands on his chest. She looked up at him, and the wanting she saw in his eyes matched her own. "Isaac," she whispered, and he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when she pressed closer, it deepened. His lips were warm and soft, and he tasted like the coffee they had been drinking. Grace felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, every nerve in her body alive. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," Isaac said roughly. "I have been wanting you to. Grace, I love you. I know it is fast, but I am sure. I love your strength and your skill and the way you never give up. I love how you look in the morning with sawdust in your hair. I love your stubbornness and your kindness and the way you see the best in things. I love you, and I want to build a life with you." She could barely speak past the lump in her throat. "I love you too. I think I started loving you when you pulled the splinters from my hands and did not treat me like I was fragile." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Grace felt all the broken pieces inside her start to fit back together in a new pattern, stronger than before. They were married in September of 1891 in the small church in Guthrie, with half the town attending because Grace's father had been well loved, and people were happy to see his daughter finding joy again. Grace wore a simple dress of blue cotton, and Isaac wore a new shirt he had bought specially for the occasion. When he promised to love and cherish her, his voice was steady and sure, and when she made the same promise, she meant every word. Their wedding night was tender and a little awkward, both of them nervous, but they laughed together and fumbled together, and loved each other with an honesty that made up for any lack of experience. Afterward, lying in the bed in their small house behind the workshop, Grace traced the scar on Isaac's ribs where the bull had kicked him. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Getting hurt, having to change your whole life." "I used to, but not anymore." He covered her hand with his, holding it against his chest. "If I had not gotten hurt, I would have stayed with that crew, kept drifting. I never would have been coming through Guthrie needing a wheel repaired. Never would have met you. So you think everything happens for a reason?" "No. I think terrible things just happen sometimes. But I think we can choose what we do with the aftermath. We can let it break us, or we can use the broken pieces to build something new." "Is that what we are doing?" "I think so. Two broken people mending each other." Grace snuggled closer to him, feeling his warmth along her whole body. "I like that." The workshop thrived under their joint management. Word spread about the quality of their work, and orders came in not just from Guthrie but from neighboring towns. They hired a young apprentice, a 16-year-old named Tom who was eager to learn. Isaac taught him while Grace handled the more delicate work, and together they built a business that was profitable and respected. But more than the business success, Grace found herself healing in ways she had not expected. Isaac's constant presence, his steady love, gave her the security to take risks again. She experimented with new wheel designs, incorporating techniques she had only read about. She even started walking more, pushing herself a little further each day with Isaac beside her for support. The nightmares grew less frequent. The pain in her leg never went away entirely, but she learned to work with it as Isaac had suggested, rather than fighting against it. And slowly, she stopped thinking of herself primarily as broken and started thinking of herself as simply Grace, Wheelwright, wife, woman learning to be happy again. Their first real test came in the winter, when a blizzard hit Oklahoma territory with unexpected ferocity. The workshop was snowed in for 3 days, and Grace's leg ached terribly in the cold. She spent most of those days in bed, frustrated and hurting, feeling like all her progress had been erased. Isaac never once complained about taking care of her. He kept the fire going, cooked their meals, and sat with her reading aloud when she could not sleep for the pain. On the 3rd day, when she broke down crying from sheer frustration, he held her and let her sob out all her fear that she would never be well, that she was a burden, that he would regret marrying her. "Grace, listen to me," he said when her tears finally subsided. "I knew who you were when I married you. I knew about your leg, about the pain. This does not change anything. But you have to take care of me like I am an invalid. First of all, you are not an invalid. You are hurt and healing, and there is a difference. Second, taking care of you is not a burden. It is what people who love each other do. Do you remember last month when I got that fever and you sat up with me for 2 nights? That was different." How, she could not answer because it was not different. He was right. This was what love meant, being there for each other in sickness and health, just like they had promised. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Do not be sorry. Just trust that I am here for the long haul, good days and bad." When spring came, Grace made a decision. She asked Isaac to teach her to ride a horse. Her leg made mounting difficult, and she could not ride for long periods, but the freedom of being able to move beyond walking distance was incredible. They started taking rides out into the prairie on Sunday afternoons. Grace side saddle on a gentle mare Isaac bought specially for her. On one of these rides, they found a spot by a creek where wildflowers grew thick, and the cottonwoods provided shade. It became their place, somewhere they could escape the noise and bustle of growing Guthrie and just be together. "I have been thinking," Isaac said one afternoon as they sat by the creek, their horses grazing nearby, "about expanding the business." "How so?" "What if we started making whole wagons, not just repairing them? I could build the bodies while you handle the wheels and the metalwork. There is good money in it, and plenty of demand with so many people still settling the territory. Grace considered this. It would mean a bigger workshop, more help, more risk. But it would also mean growth, progress, building something bigger than just survival. I like it. Let us do it. They spent the summer of 1892 expanding. Isaac built an addition to the workshop, while Grace designed new systems for organizing materials and tools. They hired 2 more workers, both young men who needed the work and were willing to learn. By fall, they completed their first full wagon, a sturdy freight hauler that they sold to a merchant for a good profit. That winter, Grace realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She was 23 now, and while that was not unusually old for a first pregnancy, she worried about how her injured body would handle it. Isaac was quietly ecstatic when she told him, but she could see the worry in his eyes too. "We will get through it together," he promised. "Whatever happens, we will face it together." The pregnancy was difficult. Grace's leg hurt more under the extra weight, and she tired easily. But Isaac was endlessly patient, taking on more of the workshop duties and making sure she rested. The town women, who had been standoffish when Grace was single and running the workshop alone, softened toward her now that she was married and expecting. They brought food and advice, and Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house became a regular visitor, full of wisdom about pregnancy and childbirth. In May of 1893, on a warm evening with thunderstorms rumbling in the distance, Grace went into labor. It was long and hard, 18 hours that tested every bit of her strength. Isaac stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, encouraging her when she thought she could not go on. Finally, as dawn broke, their son was born. He was small but healthy, with a strong pair of lungs and a head of dark hair like his father. They named him Henry Calvin Irving after both their fathers, and when Isaac held him for the first time, Grace saw tears sliding down her husband's face. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Grace. Thank you for this." Motherhood was exhausting but also unexpectedly healing. Grace had worried that her leg would make it impossible to care for a baby, but she adapted. Isaac built her a rocking chair with special cushions that supported her properly, and she could sit and nurse Henry or rock him to sleep without pain. The baby seemed to sense when her leg was bad and would settle quietly in her arms on those days as if to make it easier. They fell into a new rhythm as a family of 3. Isaac ran the workshop with their hired help, while Grace managed the books and handled customers when she could, baby Henry sleeping in a cradle nearby. When orders got backed up, Grace's old customers proved surprisingly understanding, especially when they saw Isaac's quality work. "You built something special here," old Mr. Jensen told Grace one day when he came to collect a repaired wagon wheel. "Not just the business, but a real family. Your father would be proud." After he left, Grace stood in the workshop doorway holding Henry and looking at Isaac as he worked at the forge, his shirt sleeves rolled up, completely focused on shaping a piece of metal. She thought about the broken wheel that had brought them together, about how she had been falling apart and he had offered to help mend her. But it had not been as simple as him fixing her. They had mended each other, filling the gaps in each other's loneliness, building something new from their combined brokenness. She was still limping, still had bad days, but she was also stronger than she had ever been, held up by love and partnership and shared purpose. Isaac looked up and caught her watching him. His face softened into the smile that was reserved just for her, and he set down his tools and came over, wrapping his arms around both her and Henry. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About broken things becoming whole, about second chances, about how lucky I am. We both are. He kissed her forehead. Two broken people who found each other and built something beautiful. Henry gurgled between them, and they both laughed. The future stretched ahead, still uncertain, still full of challenges they would have to face. Grace's leg would never be perfect, and Isaac would always have his old injuries. But they had each other, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As the years passed, their life together continued to unfold in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. The wagon business grew steadily, and they eventually bought the empty lot next to the workshop to expand further. By 1895, they employed 6 workers and were known throughout the Oklahoma Territory for quality craftsmanship. Henry grew into a curious toddler who loved nothing more than following his father around the workshop, playing with wood shavings and watching the forge glow. When he was 2, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was simply stronger now. Their daughter was born in February of 1896, during a cold snap that froze the creek solid. She came fast, arriving in less than 4 hours, and from the moment she drew her first breath, she had a will of iron. They named her Sarah May Irving, and she had her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes. 2 children, Isaac said wonderingly, holding Sarah while Henry climbed on his lap to see his new sister. I never thought I would have this. A family, a home, a reason to stay in one place. Do you miss it? Grace asked. The open range, the cattle drives, the moving around. He looked at her seriously. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, the freedom from responsibility. But then I look at you and Henry and now Sarah, and I know I would not trade this for anything. This is the life I was meant to have. I just had to get broken first to find it. When Sarah was 6 months old, something unexpected happened. A man rode into Guthrie looking for Isaac, a weathered cowboy named Jake who had been on Isaac's old crew. He brought news that the trail boss, a man named Bill Henderson, had died and left Isaac a small inheritance, a piece of land in Texas. Bill always said you were like a son to him, Jake explained, sitting in their small parlor holding a cup of coffee Grace had offered. He bought this land years ago, thinking to retire there, but he never got the chance. His will says it goes to you, about 100 acres outside of Austin with a creek running through it. Isaac was stunned. I do not know what to say. You do not have to decide right away, Jake said. But Bill wanted you to have it, said you were the best man he ever knew, even if you did run off without saying goodbye. After Jake left, Isaac was quiet for a long time. Grace finally asked what he was thinking. I am thinking about roads not taken, he said. That land, that is the job I was heading to when my wheel broke outside your workshop. If the wheel had not broken, I would have ended up in Texas, probably working that ranch. Never would have met you. But the wheel did break. Yes, it did, and thank God for that. He pulled her close. Grace, I do not want that land. I want to stay here in Guthrie with you and our children. This is my home now, are you sure? It is a generous inheritance. I am sure. Maybe we could sell it, use the money to expand the business even more, or save it for Henry and Sarah's futures. They decided to sell the land, and the money from the sale allowed them to finally buy the workshop property outright rather than leasing it. They also added a proper smithy and hired a trained blacksmith, making their operation truly comprehensive. But more importantly, the incident gave Isaac closure on his old life. He wrote a long letter to the rest of his old crew, explaining why he had left and thanking them for the years they had spent together. Some wrote back, and Isaac began corresponding with a few of them, reconnecting with that part of his past without letting it pull him away from his present. life was not without its challenges. In 1897, a competitor opened another wagon works in Guthrie, undercutting their prices. For several months, business dropped sharply, and they struggled to make ends meet. Grace's nightmares returned during this stressful period, and Isaac developed a persistent cough that worried her. But they weathered it together, focusing on quality over price, and eventually their reputation won out. The competitors' cheap wagons began breaking down while theirs lasted. By the end of the year, they were busier than ever, and Isaac's cough had finally cleared up. Henry started school in 1898, walking to the new schoolhouse in town with his lunch pail and slate. He was bright and curious, inheriting his mother's patience and his father's practical skills. Sarah, meanwhile, proved to be absolutely fearless, climbing everything she could reach and keeping Grace constantly vigilant. On a warm evening in June of 1899, Grace and Isaac sat on the porch of their house, watching Henry and Sarah play in the yard. Grace was 30 now, Isaac was 32, and they had been married nearly 8 years. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Grace asked. "All the time. If my wheel had not broken, if I had gone to another wheelwright, if you had not been willing to give me a chance." Isaac took her hand, his calloused fingers lacing with hers. "Any one of those things goes differently, and we never meet. I was so broken then. I thought my life was over. And I was running from everything, convinced I did not deserve to be happy." He lifted her hand to his lips. "We saved each other, Grace. You mended my loneliness, and I helped you find your strength again. You did more than help me find it. You showed me I had never lost it." Sarah came running up to the porch then, grass in her hair and dirt on her face, demanding a drink of water. Henry followed more sedately, carrying a frog he had caught and wanted to show his father. Isaac examined the frog seriously while Grace got Sarah her drink, and in that moment, Grace felt a profound sense of peace. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of scars or pain, but the presence of love and purpose. She still limped, probably always would. Her legs still ached on cold days, and she still sometimes had nightmares, but she was not broken anymore. She was whole in a different way than before, stronger for having been shattered and rebuilt. The years continued to pass. Oklahoma Territory became the state of Oklahoma in 1907, and Guthrie briefly served as its capital before losing that status to Oklahoma City. The town changed and grew, and Irving Wagon Works changed and grew with it. Henry showed no interest in wheelwrighting but loved working with wood, so Isaac taught him carpentry and fine furniture making. Sarah, surprising everyone, turned out to have a gift for metalwork and spent hours at the smithy learning from their blacksmith, despite the raised eyebrows of townspeople who thought it unladylike. "Let them talk," Grace told Isaac when he worried about Sarah's reputation. "I got enough of that when I was running the workshop alone. If she wants to learn smithing, she should learn it." In 1910, when Grace was 41 and beginning to think her childbearing years were behind her, she discovered she was pregnant again. The pregnancy was difficult at her age, and the doctor advised caution. Grace spent much of it resting, frustrated by her limitations but determined to see it through. Their second son was born in January of 1911, smaller than Henry had been but healthy. They named him James Michael Irving, and his arrival seemed to breathe new life into the whole family. Henry, now 17, was protective of his baby brother. Sarah, 15 and full of teenage energy, was surprisingly gentle with the baby. Isaac, watching Grace nurse their newborn son, marveled at her strength. "You continue to amaze me," he said, "after everything your body has been through to do this again." "We made something beautiful," Grace replied, looking down at James's sleeping face. 3 times now. That is not bad for 2 broken people. As James grew, it became clear he had inherited his mother's gift for wheelwrighting. Even as a toddler, he was fascinated by the workshop, by the way wheels turned and parts fit together. Isaac began teaching him young, just as Grace's father had taught her. The business continued to thrive through the 1910s, adapting to the changing times. Automobiles were becoming more common, and some predicted the end of wagon works entirely. But Isaac and Grace diversified, beginning to do metalwork for early cars and trucks while still building wagons for farmers and those who could not afford motorized vehicles. Henry married in 1915, a sweet girl named Margaret from a neighboring town. They settled nearby, and Henry opened his own furniture workshop with Isaac's help. Sarah, to everyone's surprise except her parents, announced she had no intention of marrying anytime soon. She wanted to travel, to learn metalwork from craftsmen in other parts of the country. Grace and Isaac supported her decision, though they worried about a young woman traveling alone. "She is tough," Isaac said, "like her mother. I was never that brave at her age. You survived an accident that would have killed most people, then kept your father's business going after he died. You were plenty brave." James, meanwhile, was becoming an excellent wheelwright by his teenage years. He had patience and precision, the same qualities Grace's father had valued in her. Sometimes Grace watched him work and felt her father's presence, as if his knowledge and skill lived on through the generations. In 1920, Grace and Isaac celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. The whole town turned out for the party, which was held at the church hall. Henry and Margaret came with their 3 children. Sarah came home from her travels, full of stories about the blacksmiths she had worked with in St. Louis and Chicago. James, now 9, gave a speech he had written himself about his parents being his heroes. As Grace and Isaac danced together that night, she thought about the broken wheel that had brought them together almost 30 years before, about the cowboy who had said he would mend her and asked her to mend his loneliness in return. They had both kept their promises, year after year, through good times and hard ones. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, his arms around her waist, his gray eyes still as sharp and kind as they had been that first day. "I am thinking about wheels," she said. "How they are made of so many pieces, all working together. How you cannot tell which spoke was broken and repaired because once the wheel is whole, it is just a wheel, strong and functional." "That is a metaphor, is not it?" she laughed. "Maybe. I am thinking we are like that wheel. We came together broken, but now you cannot tell where my brokenness ends and your wholeness begins, or vice versa. We are just us, just Isaac and Grace together. I like that." He pulled her closer, and she rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "Grace Calloway Irving, you are the best thing that ever happened to me." "The feeling is mutual, Isaac Irving." They danced until the music stopped, and then they danced a little longer, not wanting the moment to end. The 1920s brought more changes. The business adapted further, focusing more on metalwork and less on wagon building as automobiles became increasingly common. James proved innovative, designing new tools and techniques that made the work more efficient. At 18, he was already being consulted by other craftsmen throughout the state. Grace was in her 50s now, and while her leg had never healed completely, she had learned to live with it so thoroughly that most days she barely thought about it. She walked with a cane on bad days, but otherwise managed well. The nightmares had faded to occasional wisps, and she could think about her father without overwhelming grief. Isaac had aged well, his dark hair now thoroughly gray, his face lined but still handsome. His ribs still hurt when the weather changed, but he never complained. They were both a little slower, a little more careful, but they were still working side by side in the workshop they had built together. Sarah returned home in 1926, having traveled and learned all she wanted to. She announced her engagement to a metalworker she had met in Denver, a man named Robert who shared her passion for the craft. They married that summer and opened their own smithy in Guthrie, in friendly competition with the Irving workshop. Henry's furniture business was thriving, and his oldest son was learning the trade. James, now 25, was running the day-to-day operations of the workshop while Grace and Isaac stepped back into advisory roles. He had recently started courting a young teacher named Elizabeth, and Grace suspected an engagement was coming soon. On a September evening in 1927, Grace and Isaac sat in their favorite spot by the creek, the place they had been coming to for over 30 years. The cottonwoods were starting to turn gold and the air had the first hint of autumn coolness. "I have been thinking about retirement," Isaac said. Grace looked at him in surprise. "Really? James does not need us hovering over him anymore. He is a better wheelwright than I ever was, if I am being honest, and I would like to spend more time just being with you, traveling a little, seeing the places we have always talked about visiting." "I would like that too," Grace admitted. "I love the workshop, but I am tired. My leg hurts more than it used to, and I would like to rest." "Then let us rest. We have earned it." They officially retired in the spring of 1928, signing the business over to James with the agreement that he would keep the Irving name. There was a big celebration, with speeches about how Grace and Isaac had built not just a business but a legacy. How they had shown what was possible when two people worked together with love and determination. James married Elizabeth that summer, and they moved into the house behind the workshop, the same house where Grace and Isaac had lived for so many years. Grace and Isaac built a new, smaller house on the edge of town, with a wide porch and a garden where Grace could grow flowers. Retirement was strange at first. Grace kept wanting to go to the workshop, to check on orders and make sure things were running smoothly. But gradually, she let go, trusting James to carry on what they had started. She and Isaac took a trip to Missouri to see the town where he had grown up. They visited his mother's grave and the house where he had lived as a boy, now occupied by a different family. They went to St. Louis and saw the great arch and the riverboats, marveling at how much the world had changed since their youth. They returned to Guthrie content, ready to settle into a quieter life. They spent their days tending the garden, reading and visiting with their children and grandchildren. Henry had 4 children now, all grown or nearly so. Sarah had 2 daughters who showed signs of inheriting their mother's fearless spirit. And James and Elizabeth welcomed their first child in 1930, a daughter they named Grace for her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Grace felt the circle complete. She had been given a second chance at life, at happiness, at purpose. She had taken it, and she had built something lasting. In 1935, Grace and Isaac celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary quietly, just the 2 of them and their children. Grace was 66 now, Isaac 68. They moved slower, and Isaac sometimes needed a cane himself now, but they were still together, still in love, still partners in every way. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Grace asked as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "When I told you I was broken. I said I would mend you. You did, you know. Not in the way I expected, but you did. You showed me that being broken does not mean being useless or weak. You showed me that broken things can be strong in different ways." Isaac took her hand, his grip still firm despite the arthritis that plagued his fingers now. "And you mended my loneliness. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stop running. We mended each other, Grace. That is what love does." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside the house, the clock they had bought 40 years ago ticked steadily, marking the passage of time that had been so kind to them despite its inevitable march. Years continued to pass peacefully. They watched their grandchildren grow up and begin their own lives. Henry's oldest grandson was studying engineering at the university in Norman. Sarah's daughters both became skilled metalworkers, carrying on their mother's legacy. James and Elizabeth had 2 more children, a son and another daughter, and the workshop continued to thrive under James's management. Grace's leg grew more troublesome with age, and by her 70th year, she was in a wheelchair on her worst days. But she faced this limitation with the same pragmatic grace she had faced all her challenges, adapting rather than despairing. Isaac built ramps for their house and fashioned a special cart that he could pull, taking her on their old rides out to the creek when the weather was fine. In the summer of 1941, as the world teetered on the brink of another great war, Grace fell ill with pneumonia. She was 72, and the illness hit her hard. For 2 weeks, she drifted in and out of fever while Isaac sat by her bedside, holding her hand and talking to her, reminding her of their life together, begging her to stay. She pulled through, but the illness left her weaker. She spent most of her time in bed or in a chair by the window, watching the world go by. Isaac never left her side except when absolutely necessary. On a September morning in 1942, Grace woke feeling unusually clear-headed and peaceful. Isaac was already awake, sitting in his chair beside her bed, and she smiled at him. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning, my love. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but happy." She reached for his hand, and he took it immediately. "Isaac, I need you to know something." "What is it?" "I need you to know that these 51 years with you have been the best years of my life. That even on the hardest days, I never once regretted saying yes when you offered to stay." His eyes filled with tears. "Grace, please do not talk like this. I am not giving up. I am just making sure you know. You saved my life that day you rode into Guthrie with your broken wheel. You gave me a reason to keep going when I had almost given up. You loved me when I could not love myself. That is a gift I can never repay. You repaid it every single day." Isaac leaned forward, bringing her hand to his lips. "You gave me a home, Grace. A real home, not just a place to sleep, but somewhere I belonged. You gave me a family and purpose and joy I never thought I deserved. If anyone did the saving, it was you." They sat together quietly, hands clasped, as the morning sun streamed through the window. All their children came that day, some instinct telling them to visit. The house filled with the sounds of their family, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now. That evening, after everyone had left and it was just Grace and Isaac again, she asked him to take her out to the porch. He wrapped her in blankets despite the warm evening and carried her outside, settling her in her favorite chair while he sat beside her. They watched the stars come out, the same stars they had watched together for more than 5 decades. Grace felt at peace, complete in a way that had nothing to do with her body's frailty and everything to do with the fullness of her life. "Thank you," she whispered to Isaac, "for everything. For staying, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for being brave enough to let me stay, for trusting me, for loving me back." He kissed her forehead gently. "I love you, Grace Calloway Irving. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Isaac Irving, always and forever." Grace lived through that night and many more after. The illness that autumn had been a scare, but she rallied, finding new strength in the presence of her family. She lived to see her youngest great-grandchild born, lived to celebrate her 75th birthday with a party that filled the church hall just as their anniversary parties had done. She passed peacefully in her sleep on a spring morning in 1945, with Isaac holding her hand as he had held it through all the important moments of their life together. She was 76 years old, and she had lived a full, rich life beyond anything she had imagined possible that day. A broken cowboy had ridden into her workshop with a damaged wheel. Isaac mourned her deeply, but not desperately. Their children worried about him, but he assured them he was all right. "I had 53 years with the love of my life," he told them. "That is more than most people ever get. I am sad she is gone, but I am grateful for every moment we had." He lived another 3 years, spending his time with his family and tending Grace's grave. He told stories about her to anyone who would listen, keeping her memory alive. He still went to their spot by the creek sometimes, sitting on the bank and talking to her as if she could hear. On a summer evening in 1948, Isaac sat on his porch watching the sunset, just as he and Grace had done so many times before. He was 81 years old, and he felt ready. He closed his eyes, and when his daughter Sarah came to check on him an hour later, he was gone, a peaceful smile on his face. They buried him next to Grace, under a cottonwood tree in the Guthrie Cemetery. The whole town turned out for the funeral, testament to the legacy they had built together. On their shared headstone, James had inscribed simple words: Isaac and Grace Irving. They mended each other. 1891–1948. The workshop continued under James's leadership and eventually passed to his son. The Irving name remained synonymous with quality craftsmanship in Guthrie for generations. Henry's furniture business thrived, and Sarah's smithy became famous throughout Oklahoma. But beyond the business legacy, Isaac and Grace left something more important. They left the example of their love, of two broken people who had found each other and built something beautiful from their combined pieces. They left children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who understood that brokenness was not the end of the story, that with love and patience and partnership, anything could be mended. Their story became part of Guthrie's history, told and retold through the years. The wheelwright who was broken herself, and the cowboy who said he would mend her, who asked her to mend his loneliness in return. Two people who proved that the strongest things are often those that have been broken and carefully repaired. That healing is not about becoming what you were before, but about building something new and equally valuable from the pieces. In the end, that was their greatest legacy, not the wheels they built or the business they created, but the simple truth that love, real love, was the best mending tool of all. It could take two shattered souls and make them whole again, not by erasing the breaks, but by filling them with something stronger than what had been there before. And so their story lived on, a testament to the power of second chances, of choosing to stay when it would be easier to leave, of seeing past surface brokenness to the strength and beauty underneath. A story of the Wild West, of Oklahoma Territory in its youth, but more importantly, a story of love that transcended time and circumstance, enduring beyond life itself.